Good morning, traders. All right. TGIF. That's all I can say. It's been quite the week. Um, Market's been a little bit all over the place, but kind of stubborn for the most part in some ways. All right, let's take a look at this ES to start out with, right? Hang on one second. All right. So the SPOOs, of course, had this big gap, and I highlighted the gap from uh, the, this was the high from, I believe it was Tuesday, right? And let's see, and this was the low from Thursday. So we still have a gap here in the ES US session to fill. Now, we did get down there. We came in about halfway during Europe, but I look at these gaps. If it's a gap in the US session, it needs to get filled in the US session because it is the most important session for at least the indices, right? So that would be right around that 85.50 would fill this gap. Plus, we have these single prints this over here during the ES session too that we can get down to, even if we get down to the overnight lows, which is really the end of the single prints from that uh, rally that we had during the FOMC, the CPI. That would be sufficient for today. I think if we get down there and test it, they might just hold the overnight lows. But I do feel like the market is going to possibly soften up a bit. Now, on the upside, we've got the pivot at 54.24.26 area. That's the POC from yesterday. It's also where we kind of supported the market on this overnight low. I think that was 26 and a quarter. This was the light volume test below it. This is also the top of the value area and the end of these single prints. So it's very possible we can do either or in the morning because the market's still bullish. We've still had a big, you know, huge rally that we held up pretty well. You can see in this area where we did 4 days of balance and then came out of this balance. So, um, but a push back down here is very possible today. I think you might see a little profit taking going into the end of Friday. We've had such big moves to the upside. Of course, for the most part, the ES got driven quite a bit by Apple being up like 2, 3 days in a row, $15, and you've got all these AI stocks. So the Nasdaq was the driver a little bit for the ES, since the 4 or 5 of the Nasdaq stocks make up over 20% of the S&P weight. So now that you're getting a little bit of a come back to reality, not much, but the Nasdaq's down 47. You can see everything else kind of collapsed, especially the Dow and the Russell. The Russell's been really uh, having a tough time. So I'm favoring the downside after the opening. The point of control is right around 54.12, right here where you see this, that you can see it's updating. And so we're in the middle of the value area from the overnight session. Point of control comes in right here. I do feel like at first you'll see a little bit of a attempt to take it a little lower, get some profit taking. And then, they might try to hold this overnight low, or even the US session low isn't that far away. It's the first support would be the US session low. All right. Hang on one second. All right. All right. So 54.08 half is the US session low. So that might be the first test. To get back below that, we can work our way into this gap in this overnight session. So we'll do a little wait and see after the first 15 minutes, let it play out, and we'll go from there. Okay, so pivot comes in at right around 25 to 26. I give it a little bit of room just because the swings we've been having. All right, let's take a look at the crude. Crude here is looking pretty good. The only thing for me is that we've had such a big rally, no pushback, that you might just see the crude like come back down now, test the pivot, which is a pretty big area for me. This 78.50, it's the point of control from yesterday. It's the top of the value area for the overnight session and the previous overnight session. And right below there, we have the point of control pretty close. So 78.40 to 50 is going to be a pretty decent area, but I think, you could see us try to fill in this cave. We got a little bit of work here to do and to pretty much, do some development inside before we go back up. Market still looks good. This, in the big picture, I think, we're going to see that $80 level before we see 77.50. I think that's in the cards. Anyway, let's keep an eye on the crude right here. I think the crude is trying to hold up at the moment, but if it takes out the lows of the day, this morning lows, let's say they get below 78, 75, we should get a pretty good push down to the 78.50, maybe even 40. Okay. And then below here, we've got 78.20 to 21 is the 200-day moving average in case we do get on the other side of the pivot. All right. This gold has been pretty much a stud muffin, and I just realized I forgot to put in my pivot here. Give me a second. All right, let's do this here. So for the gold, this 2330 has been pretty pivotal. You could see all the way back. You could see the highs here, this high, and this day, the point of control, the following day, the point of control here, the low at this point, point of control on this day, and the top of the value range. So 2330 is a big area. I don't think we're going to get down there. We had quite the pounding trying to test this swing low down at right around that 2308. Couldn't really take it out, and it's held up pretty well. So now I think you can get a continuation back up, maybe get up to this high the high volume node and the high of the week right around this 2359.60 area. But for the time being, gold is trying to catch a nice bounce. It's up pretty nicely now, but hey, we've had some pretty big days on both sides in the past. So you can easily catch another $10, $12 rally. Now, on the flip side, we do have some work that we can do back down to the pivot. So if we get below the previous US session high, let's say 41, then we can make it back down to this 30 pivot. If we do get down to 30, that's going to be a good support area to look to either cover a short or maybe possibly get long. Okay. All right, let's move on. Today we're trading the SEP in the EC. EC's got this huge gap still on the weeklies and monthlies. The currencies in general don't look good, but the EC for sure is not looking great. We had this huge gap here from yesterday's low during the US session to today's high, and looking like we could continue lower. I think we're going to take out the overnight lows before we get back into the gap. And I think you have a little pressure to the downside here that can continue today. And let's see if they can test this the overnight low, and hold. Then you can catch maybe a little bit of a bounce, and they can try to get back in to try move back into the gap area, right? My pivot comes in at 107.69, 70 area. If they get back above that, that's like back above the swing low, then we can continue to move higher and maybe even not only fill the gap, but catch a really big move. This is kind of a very cavish, and it's also the value area right here. The gap is pretty much also the value area and the cave. So if we do take out the highs of the day, current high, which we opened up in easy and then sold off, then we can work our way back into this gap a little bit. Not, too friendly. Market's looking like we got a huge leg down in the currencies, and it's very possible that we're going to see some more lower levels next week, and the EC just doesn't look well. And, we broke major support and a pretty big measured leg down that possibly we can see 103 to 104 sooner than later. Okay, so right currently, let's see, this morning's high that 107.53. Is it 53, 43? Basically 43. We can catch a little pop back into the gap area. Time being, it looks like we're the pressures to test the overnight lows first. All right, let's move on to these bonds. Bonds, James Bond. There we go. So we have no gap in the bonds, and the market had opened up higher, took out the overnight highs, right? This was good resistance at this 10 or 120.25, and I think we got up to 24, and the market came back down. If we take out the lows, we've got this cave. I do feel like we could test the lows and get back down to 119.26. That's where the pivot is. This is the point of control from overnight and the overnight session or the US session, which I think will hold. It's, we've got this cave kind of area. So, the bonds look like in the big picture, like the see, the bonds are the opposite. I think this time they're kind of not as correlated. The bonds could have some more movement to the upside, and in the longer picture, I like the bonds, but a little bit of a comeback down to this 1925.26 would fill this cave and fill in some of the structure that we need to kind of fill in single prints from the US session here and the single. All right, so let's go back to the drawing board here. Get ready for the opening. You can see quite a bit of price overlap before the opening, right? And this is right around the point of control, as you can see from the post-market Europe session, pre-market. And you can see how the volume is just dying at the moment because it's not urgent. We are down 24, but we're also big picture. We're not that far from the all-time highs. It's just the market may come back in, needs probably to fill in this gap sooner than later, kind of work on that. But as you know, you can't predict this market as far as before the opening. We like to watch the first 15 minutes, right? And then we take one data point at a time. And for the time being, like I said, I think we could test the previous US session lows. I don't know if we'll get down to the overnight lows, but that would be a possibility since we still have a gap in single prints here to fill from this report number. All right, let's get ready for the opening. I'm going to grab some coffee and let's rock and roll.